I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined in the studio by State Senator Jeremy Zellner, a Buffalo area Democrat, and as well as the former Democratic Elections Commissioner for Erie County, who won a special election to the Senate earlier this year. Thanks for making the time, Senator, and congrats on the election victory.
Thank you, Dave. Absolutely.
So you take over for Sean Ryan, who, at least from my perspective, filled this sort of moderate, consumer protection-focused lane here in Albany. What sort of identity are you looking to craft for yourself here at the Capitol?
Well, I'm not trying to craft an identity so much as get things done and stand up for issues that I'm hearing about constantly. As you know, I'm on the campaign trail for election number 2 of 3 this year. So all I am hearing is affordability. People are getting squeezed with their, they're getting their paychecks in and they're sending them out to insurance companies. They're paying high costs for their prescription drugs, for their rent, and something's got to be done about it. I mean, when I was elected and sworn in, within like half an hour, we voted on a bunch of bills. One of them was to prevent profits from the utility companies from being sky high. They were capped at what they could get. And so right now, I'm not so much concerned about myself and my identity, but I have a very unique, terrific district. It's a very suburban district, but it includes what I like to say is the best part of the city of Buffalo, the northern part that includes Buffalo State, our beautiful art gallery, some amazing neighborhoods on the west side of Buffalo and North Buffalo. So I'm just really proud and excited to represent that district and work on the issues that I'm hearing about every day.
But I would argue that in order to be an effective lawmaker, you do have to pick your spots, so to speak, and you can't necessarily be a champion of all issues unless maybe you're Amy Paulin over in the Assembly. So are there any things that you think you in particular can be a strong voice for or a strong advocate for, something that maybe you focused on in your background or that maybe with the elections knowledge, that's a space where you're going to fill? I mean, where do you think you can leave a unique mark?
Well, Dave, I think I'm telling folks that, winning this election and coming in when I did was like being dropped off at a new high school halfway through the year.
Sure.
So I'm still learning a lot of things. I'd love to get more into the elections, particularly with what is happening in the federal government and push back on that and give my expertise on that as well as local government. I'm very, very interested in local government issues and state issues that pertain. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I'm very interested in that as well. But right now, it's kind of like someone said to me, you can't be somebody who's looking to solve every problem or in every issue. And I said, no, yes, I can. I learned very quickly that you can't do that. We've really got to focus. So it's been very much a learning curve to get my staff in place. We've got a terrific legislative director here in Albany full time. We've got great staff in Buffalo and terrific chief of staff and people who have already fielded thousands and thousands of calls and emails in our district office. It's been really a lot of work just to put that in place. We literally had 48 hours to put our budget memo to the leader together within the time that we were sworn in and put in. So it's been a lot, but I feel like we've gotten a lot accomplished in this short time.
Well, you mentioned the budget memo, and for people who aren't familiar with this process, all of the Senate majority members essentially go to leadership, tell the central staff, hey, here are some of our priorities, here are some things that we're fighting for, often parochial issues, maybe things, in your case, unique to the 61st Senate District. So what are you hoping to come away with from this budget that might be unique to the Buffalo area, whether it is policy or whether it's maybe funding?
Well, one thing is funding for SUNY and funding for SUNY capital issues at Buff State particularly.
Sure.
We've had some serious issues there this winter where basically there were some buildings that were not heated because they had problems with their infrastructure, and students had to go shower and basically utilize the bathrooms in trailers in the middle of winter in Buffalo where it's 7 degrees. We had some of the coldest weather stretches that we've ever had over the last 6 months. And so we really need, it's not sexy sometimes to fund infrastructure in our institutions, but SUNY definitely needs that help, and I'm hoping that we can deliver for both Buff State and UB. There's a bilingual education institute at Buff State that we've funded for $3 million in our one house that I'm hoping to keep there, because we've got a shortage of teachers who want to teach Spanish and other bilingual courses, and we've got to have the mechanism in place in order to have, keep pumping out those teachers throughout the state. So those are two priorities of mine. We also have an institute for our laborers that we're hoping to get funded in Buffalo as well. And I'm very concerned about the insurance situation in our state. I want to make sure that we push back on any fraud, but that shouldn't come at the cost of people who have been injured through negligence, and that shouldn't come at the cost of people who are doing their job to seek justice for people who have been injured or hurt because of negligence. So this is a lot that's happening right now, and those were some of the priorities we put in there.
That last comment seems like a not so veiled allusion to the governor's plan to reduce car insurance costs. This is one of the issues that's holding up budget negotiations. What do you think could potentially be the final product of what the governor proposed in terms of what might make it into a final budget? Is there something that seems acceptable to you?
I've heard a lot from the trial lawyers in my community who I work very closely with. I've heard some from the insurance companies. We've had great conversations in our conference, and I think there's going to be some give and take with everything, and I don't think anybody's going to get everything they want, and we'll have to see what happens.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you. For listeners just joining us, I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with State Senator Jeremy Zellner, a Buffalo area Democrat who was elected to the chamber earlier this year in a special election. So your predecessor is now the mayor of Buffalo, and he's got a bit of a budget problem there. So what sort of requests is he making of you as well as the Buffalo delegation more broadly in terms of support for their budget? And are you anticipating trying to get something above and beyond the state aid that the governor has initially at least proposed?
Well, right now we're working with the mayor. Obviously, the governor's proposal to give $40 million to the city was a big help to us. But the mayor is asking for other legislative proposals. He's got a request to allow the control board in the city of Buffalo to borrow for one. So we're trying to work through that. But we also have an elected city council, an elected city council president, and they aren't all on the page sometimes with the mayor. The mayor has come down and made his case. He's got a lot of friends down here. We're all hoping for the best for the city. We're all working really hard to get what the mayor needs to give him the tools to bring the city back. It's been a 20-year problem in the making of not raising taxes at all, and he has a revenue problem. He doesn't have a spending problem. So he's putting every tool at his disposal to make tough decisions and get this done. He's got a very tough decision to raise taxes at a very big rate right now, and we're trying to give him the tools to not have that burden fall solely on the taxpayers of the city of Buffalo. It's not going to be easy, but we'll see how this shakes out.
Well, you mentioned your interest in local government earlier, and you talked about the financial woes of the city of Buffalo. One of the items that is at least percolating in the background of budget discussions is this idea of changing pension reform for public employees hired in the last decade and a half. Maybe it ends up helping with recruitment and retention of public employees. The one thing we do know is that it will cost more money if those plans are implemented, those pension sweeteners. What do you think about that conversation? And is that a problem for cities like Buffalo that, as you just talked about, have an imbalance in their budgets?
Yeah. Well, it's a real number. I think NICOM and some the Conference of Mayors put out a memo saying that it would be $1.5 billion, close to $1.5 billion cost to the state and local governments to fix the tier system. There is a serious problem with retention and finding employees to be in the public sector right now, and I think a lot of that has to do with their pensions. That if you have a teacher that you're trying to recruit a teacher and they know they're going to have to work X number of years and not make much of a pension, it's going to be hard to get them motivated to come in every day.
What job do you imagine they would go to that would have a better pension?
Well, look, there are a lot of.
I can't name one.
Well. There's some private sector places that are giving some pretty good incentives these days.
You'll have to show me those off the air, and maybe I'll be looking for a new career.
But, this is going to be at a steep cost, and we've got to find a way to deal with these issues. That's why we are right now in budget negotiations, because there's no easy answer. These are really complex, serious issues that everybody wants to come to an agreement on, but as I can imagine, this is my first time, but this always takes a little while.
Sure.
Because we want to get the right answer. We don't want to just rush.
So in addition to passing a budget, you're also working on legislation. And I noticed you have a handful of bills dealing with the e-bikes and e-scooters. How did that become something on your radar?
Well, I've worked really closely with my colleagues in the Assembly that represent the majority of this district, Bill Conrad and Karen McMahon, and we've got a number of parks in our district where there is just, these e-bikes are just have taken over. They're flying by people walking, they're flying by people on their bikes. It's caused a lot of accidents, and we've got to do something to kind of rein that in a little bit. These bike paths and places where these e-bikes are on are not made for motor vehicles, and these e-bikes are kind of a newer phenomenon, and we've got to get some kind of restrictions on them.
You also have a bill dealing with the Western OTB, one of the favorite gambling operators that's always in the news, it seems. What is your thoughts about their operations moving forward and sort of the accountability that you're looking for in the future there?
Well, that's exactly what it's about. This is a bill that originated in the Assembly, and I've talked with the Assembly member and other folks about it because we need accountability, we need reform there. I think this bill is going to handle some of that and what it does, and it also is going to extend the time where the reforms that were put in with weighted votes and having not one person, one vote is in place, which I think is also very fair and I think is going to help.
And lastly, we've asked this question to your likely primary opponent in June. What do you think about the process for choosing candidates for special elections? For listeners who aren't familiar, unlike an open primary for traditional elections, special elections candidates are chosen by their local committees. In your case, you were, or maybe still are, the Erie County Democratic Chair. The Erie County Democrats chose you. What do you think of the status quo, and what do you think about the potential for a more small d democratic process in the future?
Well, the interesting thing, Dave, is I'm sure you know the process used to be different. When there was that other guy that was the governor of this building and of the state, Andrew Cuomo, he didn't call any special elections because he wanted less people to deal with.
Especially if Charles Barron might be returning to the Assembly.
in the state legislature. So it used to be that the governor could call a special election in the year that the legislature was up by, I think, April 4th. Now it is must. And the folks that made that change made it a must call a special election now. And one of those people that made that change was my opponent, who sat on the elections committee and voted for this exact thing that he has been very critical of in the last couple of months. So if folks want to change that, I'm all for looking at different ways, but the party nomination process is in the election law. We're following the election law. Each party has the ability to nominate. And by the way, there is a mechanism to allow independent candidates to petition. It's a very difficult one, and maybe that's something I would be happy to look at, is whether we shorten the number of signatures and the amount of time that independents have the ability to petition to get on the ballot. But it is there nonetheless. So I've talked with Senator Gonzalez, who's the chair of the Elections Committee. I'd love to get on there. The leader has been terrific with me, seated me on the committees and gave me those designations right when I took over this seat, but said, this is our 2-year cycle. After this cycle, we're going to reshuffle the deck, and I'd love to hear about what seats you would like to sit on. But for now, as I said, I was kind of dropped in and took what was, given to me. But I would certainly be open to change, no question.
Well, we've been speaking with State Senator Jeremy Zellner. He is a Buffalo area Democrat. Senator, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, Dave.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided in part by the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Fraud and lawsuit abuse impact car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Reforms are being proposed to mitigate their impact. Information on these reforms is available at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.